Talking about Capitol Hill, the former president, as I said, was on Capitol Hill speaking with many Republicans. Not every Republican, by the way, met with former president. And one thing I wanted to ask Leanna, because you have so much great reporting about this, can you take us sort of behind the scenes? What did we learn, other than the fact that apparently Mitch McConnell and former President Trump now can smile at each other?
And fist bump.
And fist bump and shake hands, all of it.
Yeah.
What did we learn? You have great reporting on this. What does it mean?
It was quite a remarkable day yesterday on Capitol Hill. You had the meeting in the morning with House Republicans who mostly embrace the former president. That was more, it was pretty subdued for Donald Trump, but it was a little more, peppy than later in the afternoon, which was the most astonishing meeting, where he met with Senate Republicans, most of them, except for two of them, Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, who want nothing to do with this man. He did not jab Mitch McConnell. He did not make fun of anyone in the room like he usually does. He has very publicly been a foil to Mitch McConnell. Instead, it was peacemaker. They were senators came out of that meeting and saying that they had never been in a room with senators who many of them did not want him to be the nominee and Donald Trump and have it be such a collegial meeting.
Mitt Romney was in there.
Mitt Romney was in there. Senator Josh Hawley came out and he told me, that was surreal. Like, he could not believe that meeting. And so it is ultimately what it means is that the party is 100% behind Donald Trump in a turnabout moment that we would not have expected in the days after January 6th.
And, I think that this was obviously an effort to rally the troops. But, this is the third time that President Trump has been on the ballot, in a presidential election cycle. And we've seen the first two installments of this trilogy. There are all these public disagreements over whether or not he should be the nominee. There's always this barrage of criticism. There's those Republicans who are in more moderate districts or, if they're senators, in swing states where they feel like they have to draw some distance from his demeanor. But then at the end of the day, they do all come around and rally behind him, and they do line up behind him. And I think that a large part of that is, of course, because the overwhelming majority of the Republican electorate is behind former President Trump. And so, when you saw this show of unity, I think, in some ways, yes, January 6th seemed like the breaking point. But then they also saw the way in which we were talking about how this is so, baked into the way that the Republican electorate thinks. Everything they think of Trump, the idea that the whole system is rigged against him, even their views on January 6th. I think even those Republicans who broke with him on that day or in the days after, they saw where the voters are, and that's firmly behind
And
him.
then ultimately, the reason is because of Election Day. They all want to win, and they've made the decision that we will only win if we are with him. And they want to take back the Senate, they want to win the presidency, and they want control.
And it's not just Congress, though. I mean, if you look at the Republican Party writ large, perhaps with the exception of Mike Pence, who has said that he will not endorse Donald Trump, you're seeing it from folks like Nikki Haley, Chris Sununu, people who had some pretty terrible things to say about his qualifications for president, but if they're looking ahead and saying they want to be a part of the Republican Party
and leader for the former
well, they will at least vote. But still, after saying that someone's not qualified and unfit, to then come out and say that you will even vote for them. If you want to be a leader in this Republican Party, then that's what they feel they have to do.
So, question for you: the former president also boasted that he thinks Virginia is now a potential state that Republicans should be looking at, places like Minnesota, New Mexico. He is trying to expand the map, or at least he wants Democrats to think he's expanding the map. There's a game of making people spend money in places they don't want to. Right. What's the Biden campaign think about this? Do they really think these states are on the board here?
No, I understand what the thought process on Minnesota because of how he performed there in 2016, and of course the Biden campaign is also trying to quote unquote expand the map in places like North Carolina. They think that potentially there's an option in Florida. I was just in North Carolina over the last couple days, and Democrats there are hopeful because of abortion rights that there's maybe something that they can do there as well. So both sides are looking at that, but it probably will come down once again to the core battleground states, especially the upper Midwest, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, as well as Michigan.
Evan, to close out this sort of part of the discussion, one thing that's happening here with the former president is he's saying to Republicans, hey, I'm great for you, as Leanne and others were saying. And he's saying, I'll campaign for you down ballot also. Not all of them are sure they want him to, but he also is now endorsing more moderate candidates, sort of a more Mitch McConnell kind of strategy versus the more natural, I think, kind of more extreme folks that he's endorsed in the past. How is that working exactly? Because he's sort of saying, I want congressional members who are more likely to win, but less extreme. But I also want you to vote for me. I'm the one who's going to throw fire and brimstone at everyone.
But to say that, one interesting part about that meeting to me of this week is that he endorsed Larry Hogan in Maryland, who I don't think really wants his endorsement at all. So it's unclear. Like, was that like a poison pit? Like, hey, by the way, I don't like you. I'm endorsing you, or don't know. But I think that the answer here is that he thinks that he can get loyalty from these people, and also the Republican Party is his entirely. I mean, his what is it? Daughter-in-law is like now that like runs the RNC. I mean, everything is his to do what he wants with. And I think that a lot of these meetings were about that. We had some reporting at Notice. Some of my colleagues talked about what happened inside the House meeting, and they mentioned that, some members who were in the meeting said, like, oh, he was rambling a lot. He sounded like a drunk uncle at a family reunion, things like this. They weren't like totally into it, but they went and they felt that it was the right thing to do to go. And so when you see him endorsing, you see him moving around, it's because there aren't a lot of Republicans who feel like they can say, I don't want to be around you. And they could be very good reason for that, right? I mean, he's very popular in his own party, more than he was before. And like I said, he's taken over pretty much everything. And if you're a Republican, don't you want to be with the guy who's winning?
So the split screen here was the former president meeting with the Republicans as the Democrats in the Senate were passing yet again another measure dealing with reproductive rights. In this case, it was IVF, and a measure that Senate Democrats said would protect IVF here. Sabrina, I want to ask you about this. It's June. The election's not until November. But how important is this kind of push from especially Senate Democrats, but all Democrats, to just make sure this idea of reproductive rights is out there? It seems to be what they're really pinning a lot of their hopes on.
I think this is going to be one of the central themes for President Biden's reelection campaign and the Democratic Party going into November, because they do feel like they do really well on the issue of reproductive rights. It is one of the main reasons why Democrats outperformed expectations in the 2022 midterm elections. And now they have this opening on IVF, which was not really part of the national discourse until this Alabama Supreme Court ruling months ago, which if Republicans had just distanced themselves from the outset, then maybe we wouldn't even be talking about it. But they had been a little bit all over the place on, whether or not they can even just clearly state that they support access to IVF, which is something that millions of Americans obviously benefit from, or at least, use in their efforts to conceive every year. So, I think that this is not a new issue for Democrats. I mean, Evan, incidentally, is at this table and was at the forefront in 2012 of reporting on then Senate candidate Todd Akin talking about legitimate rape, and the body has a way of shutting that down. And we remember how much of a disaster that was for then candidate Mitt Romney and Republicans. It did bring abortion, as a central issue in the presidential election. So I think, anytime, and you've seen reproductive rights rank highly, not just for Democrats, but also for suburban voters, suburban women, independent voters. I think Democrats are very eager for this to be a major theme going into November.
We're sort of hitting the back end of the show here, but Leanne, I want to ask you, Republicans themselves don't seem to agree on these issues exactly, what they exactly want to do, especially with IVF and contraception. And the former president sort of just said, tell people about your conviction, but that's what they've already been doing. How difficult is this for them?
It's extremely difficult. It's proven to be difficult for Republicans in 2022 midterm elections, 2023 off-year elections, and Democrats think they keep winning on this issue over and over again. They hope that continues into 2024. But you heard Donald Trump yesterday tell Republicans behind closed doors, try to the best. He said, we must message better than we did on 2022. The abortion is why Republicans lost, he says. And but he wasn't very specific on what that message should be, other than talk about it in a way that is best for you. And so that has been a huge challenge for Republicans, especially since it has been baked. Voters do not trust Republicans unless you are a very staunchly anti-abortion voter on the issue. And so it is a very difficult, canvas to unpaint.
All right, in our last couple of minutes here, going again sort of a little bit big picture, these are such core issues that have been with us for decades, and of course there's sort of new twists on them. There's new kind of aggressiveness. There's a new kind of bitter divide in this country that just doesn't seem to get any better. But I especially want to ask you two, are campaigns at risk, and they keep pushing these messages, of flatlining with voters and voters no longer being so animated about things like abortion or whatever you think about President Trump's conviction, former president's conviction? Or is it's just, this is how we are. We're always going to react to these things. What's your instinct, Evan?
Well, first I want to say it's very cool of Sabrina to shout me out like that. I mean, I had no beard then, but it's nice to know people for a long time.
I forgot.
I can barely remember what I
My
wrote.
mom's going to watch this. It's very awesome. So thank you very much for reminding everybody of that.
This is a special panel. Yes.
But the challenge with this particular issue, right, is that this is a core value of American conservatism, right? Asking to sort of like slough it off as Trump has is very difficult. People are very moved and they really, really care about this. So the animation is there for a reason.
With the debate coming up, this is exactly why both campaigns wanted to debate so early, is because they're worried that Americans are tuning all of this out, and they're hoping that they can break through all of that and get folks to start tuning back in. But my goodness, guys, it's June. It is June, and we're having a debate already.
Exactly. All right, so then since we have a couple more seconds left, do folks think, raise your hand if you think this debate will certainly happen. I'm just putting that out there. I do. I think it will happen.
I do.
Evan's not as
The
sure.
last person I interviewed about it said they didn't think so, so I'm not going to.
I mean,
whatever
you
my reporting tells me.
can't be quite sure. But then the other question is, most debates don't move the needle. This is a special election. Does anyone think that this could?
It's about getting them to
Francesca,
tune back in, though, not necessarily move the needle. And by the way, if either of them doesn't have a great debate, then they've got all summer to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, there's still remarkably about 12 to 14% of voters are undecided. How? I don't know. And so, absolutely, it's not about getting that person's vote in June. It's about getting people to start paying attention because people have tuned out.
It's that game reset. The Biden campaign has said all along, that once people tune in, they're going to really, those numbers are going to change really fast because they've seen Biden, Trump before, and they picked Biden. So this is kind of like that moment to try to wake everybody up. Like, surprise, it's election. We'll see if it works or not, but that I think is the risk. I mean, is the game here that they're playing.
I think that most people don't tend to tune in until you get to the fall, until you get to September. But this is that moment where people might remember, oh yes, there is a general election. We may not like it, but these are our two choices, and you have that moment to relive 2020 and see if your mind has changed.